Hello, this is Patrick. I'm going to be talking about the Next Generation Science Standards, which are the new national standards for science education in the United States of America. I'm going to go through each sort of three sections of this. My first section is going to be talking a little bit about the history and the background of NGSS. Then I'm going to talk about the specific nuances of the standards, so what they're made up of and what they look like. And then the third piece is I'm going to speak about the impact on teachers, what's happening now, and also sort of more general impact in society. So why have new science standards now? Well, somewhat like the Common Core, have been implemented to update the standards around math and English language arts. It was also believed that it was time to implement and update the standards around science. The important thing here to think about or to know about is that these standards were first released in April of 2013, so it's been about 5 years they've been out. Has it been implemented or begun to be adopted? It's been adopted in about 19 states. The reason it's not being adopted everywhere are manyfold, but one of them has to do with the fact that unlike Common Core, there's no financial incentive to implement these standards. So these states are doing this and funding the implementation on their own. So that means adoption has been slow so far of these new standards. Also, one of the reasons it's going a little bit slower is that there's some conservative policies at play because the standards include reference and information equated to anthropogenic climate change and also to evolution. And finally, the biggest reason why it's taking a while is that it takes a while for publishers to develop curriculum and for professional development to take place so that teachers can become comfortable with a new set of standards. What's important to know about these standards is that they impact teachers K through 12. So for the first time, there are a set of standards that are being asked of K through 5 teachers to do science. There always have been those things, but this is sort of something that spirals up. So the curriculum spirals from the early grades in K all the way through 12th grade. So there's not sort of this disjointedness. It's supposed to be seen as a seamless integration of curriculum throughout the grade levels. So that's a little bit on the historical, what's happened. Well, one other thing I should add is the reason these were brought up, and again, this relates to the Common Core, is that there was a push by the business industry and businesses to get more students graduating that had the skills they felt like were really needed in the 21st century. They weren't seeing a lot of students that could handle problem-solving skills and other things of this nature. And so from that, Common Core began to be evolved, and this sprung up as an offshoot of Common Core. And so the idea is that it's addressing more 21st century skills so that people go through a science curriculum throughout K-12 and come out being able to interact with ideas at a higher level in science. So what is the Next Generation Science Standards? Well, basically it's something that you're probably going to hear of again and again. It's called three-dimensional learning. They call it three-dimensional learning because it's made up of 3 parts. The first are the disciplinary core ideas, the second are the cross-cutting concepts, and the third are these science and engineering practices, which I'll be speaking about very briefly. Oops, and there goes my screen, so let me get back into that. What are the cross-cutting concepts? These are just the ideas that there are things that must be shared across curriculums, skills that are embedded in every subject area, and so they need to be practiced regardless of the subject area you're studying, whether it's physics or biology. So cause and effect, looking at how one thing might cause another, like the fact that a circuit is open and there's no electricity running through it, and then when you flip a switch, the circuit is closed and electricity is running through it. You can see a light bulb turn on. That's an example of learning cause and effect in physics, but that applies also to areas in biology and chemistry as well. You can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these cross-cutting concepts that relate cross-curricular. The other piece of it are the science and engineering practices. So these are things that people actually do when they're performing science. So again, this is sort of throughout different subject areas. So you would ask questions and define problems in science or in engineering, and you would obtain, evaluate, and communicate information, whether you're doing physics or chemistry, etc. There's a ninth one added in here. That's just one that seems to fit well across the curriculums as well. All of the leg of the three-dimensional learning is this idea of the content, or what they call the disciplinary core ideas. So those are the actual kind of things, tidbits about a bacteria you might learn in biology, or how light travels in physics. Those are the actual stuff that you're learning about. And you get evaluated on these three-dimensional learnings through something called performance expectations, or the sort of rubrics they might use to understand something. So I put one of these up here. The performance expectation example here talks about how you might use evidence when you're looking at heating or cooling, and how you might identify whether heating or cooling is happening, and whether or not sometimes it can be reversed or not. And so that's one standard. You can see it says 2 PSI-4. That's grade 2 primary school, or physical science, grade 2. The one below is grade 5, and it's life science. And that one's describing the movement of matter among plants, animals, decomposers, and the environment. So this is what the rubrics look like for the next generation science standards. And I thought this was a helpful slide. It just shows how Common Core and next generation science standards sort of overlap. So you see a bunch of the standards, the performance, what they're calling this performance expectations, of what you need to do to demonstrate mastery around these different topics. So you can see in math is red, science is blue, and ELA is yellow. And where they all kind of correspond or come together is gray in the middle there. And you can see that there's things like building a strong base of knowledge through context-rich text. There's one thing that you would see in all three of those areas. Or in engaging an argument from evidence. So coming up with an idea and substantiating why you think that idea is a good idea is something you would see in English language arts, or in science, or in math. So it's kind of a nice way to see how these pieces are intertwined. For the final slide, I want to talk about the effects of the next generation science standards from a policy point of view. And there's some general strengths and weaknesses. The strengths are the policy of next generation science standards tries to give students more of a chance to go deep into subject areas and have less overall topics to cover. So the idea is more depth and less breadth. So rather than having a mile wide and an inch deep, you get a little bit more understanding and depth of understanding about important science concepts. Some of the weaknesses around that are that you maybe are going to be covering fewer topics overall in the span of your science education. But people argue that because of the internet and other ways to get information quickly now, breadth is less important than actually being able to go through in-depth investigations around increasingly complex ideas in science. So how's this affecting teachers? It's still beginning to be implemented. I've been involved in some professional development around the NGSS, and particularly pre-K and K through 5 teachers are struggling with this idea of having to have this sort of sustained interaction with science and feel like they don't have enough science content knowledge to really teach it well. So that's been a big struggle for teachers, though they love doing the science. The other bit is in the middle schools, it changes the topics that 6th through 8th grade teachers might actually teach. So that's been a struggle for some teachers, maybe having to move to a different grade if they want to teach a particular topic, or having to learn new subject area to teach it. And for students, the impacts of the NGSS, again, are still beginning to be felt as it's a new set of standards. But one of the things that students tend to love from the classrooms I've seen where it's being implemented is this idea of being able to go in more depth into topics, to have more project-based learning opportunities, to take an idea like wavelengths and really apply it across different modalities, such as looking at wavelengths in light, looking at wavelengths in different mediums like water, and being able to go really deep and understand how wavelengths exist throughout both nature, but also in physics and in other areas, human designed areas. So it's a really interesting way for giving students more opportunity to engage in their learning. So I think NGSS has been pretty successful with that. I think overall people really think it's a great idea because as society has gotten more and more sort of detailed and has access to more and more information, there's needs for people being able to go deep into ideas and complex ideas and unpack them, particularly in the sciences. So that's all I have. Sorry I went a little over, but hopefully that will give you some introduction to the next generation science standards, both from sort of a historical policy perspective, looking at the effects, and also sort of thinking about its strengths and weaknesses as well as what it actually is. Thanks so much, and you can always comment if you have any suggestions or questions. Thank you.